As we have a quorum, we do not have enough people present to vote online. Just let's keep that in mind. First, we have a roll call.
All right, good morning. Please let us know if you're in attendance. If you're online, please make sure to let us know that you are online. First, Councilwoman Mandy Campbell. District Deputy Commissioner Matt Deitchley.
I'm here in person.
Good morning. Councilperson Dwight Fish.
In person.
Morning. Commissioner Carrier.
Here in person.
Councilwoman Kathy Groninger.
Here in person.
Morning. Councilwoman Lori Hammond.
Here in person.
Councilman Greg Hicksonbaugh.
Participate
Phil-
virtually.
Oh, hey, Councilman. Sorry that I missed you there. All right.
problem.
Thanks for joining us virtually. Mayor Phil Jenkins.
Here, in person.
District Deputy Commissioner Todd Johnson. He is virtual. All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Kevin Overmeyer. Councilman Mark Root.
Here in person.
Mayor Mark Center.
Online.
Mayor Jeremy Stutzman. Mayor Joseph Tallmer.
Here, live.
Commissioner Susie Wyrick.
Present in person.
And I believe the other members had told us in advance that they weren't able to attend. So we do have a quorum of members present in person. But as noted by our board chair, we do not have enough to allow for virtual voting. So all first and seconds will come from inside the room. Members that are virtual, you can feel free to ask questions. You're just not able to vote today. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. Next, we have the minutes from July 13th. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There is no chairman's report, so let's please move to the financial report. Debbie, sorry.
Good morning. Either is fine. So first, we're starting off with one last budget revision for fiscal year 22. When I had come to you guys last month, I had forgotten about one of our contractual agreements that I was trying to estimate out through the end of the year. So when that came in, that put us over budget. So I'm requesting that we move $30,000 under the contractual services line item and taking that out of the equipment and furniture line item. Does anybody have any questions? If not, I'd like to ask for the board approval of the June budget revision.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the June financial report. So through the end of our fiscal year, we were at $6,993,095.28 for our year-to-date budget, which was 86%. Our cash balance at the end of June was $3,186,077.65. Our total disbursements for the month of June was $427,843.53. Are there any questions over the June financial report?
You also want to present July?
I can do that if you guys would like me to do that. All right, so for the month of July, which is the beginning of our new 2023 fiscal year, our year-to-date expense was $494,373.34. Our cash balance at the end of July was $3,237,934.77. And our disbursements for the month of July was $728,811.71. Are there any questions over July's financial report?
So
Can you speak
Oh, yeah, just so that folks can hear you online, if you could use the microphone. Sorry about that.
Is the 30,000 strictly for budgeting next year that we missed, or does it reflect on any of these numbers you're quoting?
So the 30,000 was for fiscal year 22. The new budget for fiscal year 23 that you all passed a couple months ago, that is reflected on the July report.
Does it pertain to a particular contract, or is it just to make sure we don't have a shortfall?
The June was just to make sure that it wasn't short in that, for that year.
Yeah, so June is the end of our fiscal year, right? And so we had tried to take an estimate based on bills that were coming in to make sure that we had an idea of where we would be at. And just the timing of one came in right at the end of June. It could have come at the beginning of July. And so since it came in at the end of June, it counted towards fiscal 22. And so that took us a little over our contractual services line item for fiscal 22. And so just to finalize the budget for 22 and close that out so that no line items were over, we were modifying 22. But for 23, the budget would be the budget that was passed, I think back in June, would be the fiscal 23 budget. We will need to continue to monitor it because the 22 contractual services was slightly higher than the original 23 budget. So we'll just continue to monitor 23 as we move forward, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Nobody will be missing a chair or anything like that.
No, there will be no missing chairs.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Debbie, I got a
Yes.
question on the July disbursements. I just looking at the difference in the Kaiser Fleet LLC. I noticed there's 3 transactions in July and only 1 in June. Is there some purchases or?
So that's our contractual service for the trolley operations. And we were behind in paying them as we started. So in that time period, we ended up getting a new dispatching software system. And so in the transition of all of that, we were a little bit behind in paying some of those months services. So if there was less in June, then the June one was getting paid in July, and they're catching up there. So that's why those would be higher in July.
Yeah, so
It was more
basically-
payments than normal.
Yeah, basically the way that the contract is written is basically it's like every 15 days, there's a billing period.
Yeah, so they
Right.
bill for half of the month,
First
and
half
then
of the
we
month,
have,
second half of the month.
and then we're supposed to pay within 30 days.
And so ultimately, we may not have been behind in the sense of when we were paying because we have up to 30 days. It may have just taken, it's a timing issue of why there was 3 in 1 month. But largely because as we've transitioned to a new dispatch software, it's just taking a little bit of extra processing time because it's all new to make sure that, everything matches from a records perspective to make sure that we're paying the right amount. We don't anticipate that delay to be ongoing. It's just growing pains of a new
Yeah,
system.
it's working out the kinks basically as they started up.
One more. We don't.
No, we do not. And it was not necessarily a late payment. It was just later than normal.
Any other questions? Not, I'd like to ask for board approval of the June and July 2022 financial reports.
Second that.
I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, finally, we were able to finish up with our fiscal year 2021 audit. Our audit report was issued August 5th, and it was for the period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. You all were emailed the report with your board packets, but they are not printed out here today. So if anybody wants a hard copy or needs it resent to you, just let us know. Our exit conference was attended by James, myself, and Commissioner Wyrick, along with the Crow Chiswick team. Well, it's not Crow Chiswick anymore, sorry, the Crow team. It was a clean audit. There was no findings. There were no deficiencies. There were no material weaknesses found in either our financials or our accounting processes or, our processes, I guess. And our next audit for fiscal year 22 is going to be bumped up much sooner than it has been in the last few years. So we are already penciled in for October, either mid or late October this year to begin for this next year's audit. Are there any questions?
Just as a follow-up, happy to report with this audit, no issues, not surprised, as we have an amazing accounting team led by Debbie and assisted with Molly. And so never really have concerns there with our accounting procedures and internal controls. It's always good to have an independent auditor, though, can confirm that. And just for those not familiar, we are audited every year by the State Board of Accounts just because of how much federal money we spend. State Board of Accounts has struggled to keep up with those annual audits. And so they had hired Crow as a State Board of Accounts approved third party to do our audit. The first time we did that was last year, so this was the second time. We historically would love to see a fall audit as our fiscal year ends in July, or ends in June. And our new fiscal year starts in July. And so we always love to see a fall audit. But because of some reporting that was done to PERF many years ago, we always had to wait until the end of the calendar year. And so we prepped everything this time around with the assistance of Crow to make sure that we could just transition back to essentially being able to have a fall audit. So it's much closer to the end of our fiscal year. So we're extremely hopeful that our fiscal 22 audit, you will see much quicker than this one, just because of those timings that will be reduced. So hopefully within the next 6 months, we would already have then that final report for you to see. So there will be, we weren't sure that we were able to do that. But the thing that I want to alert you to then is that the timing of that may mean that we need to adjust our audit line item, because usually we only ever anticipate one audit happening in a fiscal year. Because of this change, we'll basically have 2 audits in a fiscal year. So in the 23 budget, we will probably have to make some adjustments. So just FYI in advance.
And I think we'll probably need a reminder when that time comes.
I know, I just like to give reminders early and often.
Deb, do you need an action on the audit and the supplemental reports?
Yeah.
I would entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
A second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On behalf of Dave Wood.
On behalf of Secretary Dave Wood, in your packet, you have July and August administrative modifications. These administrative modifications are items that the board has given staff authority to do between meetings to make changes to the transportation improvement program. These are usually minor items. There's a full definition available, but you can look at all of those modifications that were done. And if you have any questions of the modifications done in July and August, please feel free to contact our team and our staff, and we'll be happy to answer any of those for you. They are also available online for public consumption. That would end Secretary Dave Wood's report.
Thank you.
We do not need a motion to approve. That information is presented for informational purposes only.
Old business,
There is no old business.
new business.
And for new business, we'll have Allison Reagan introduce our transportation resolutions.
Good morning, everyone. So our first resolution today is Transportation Resolution 24-22. This is a new interchange construction at US 31 and State Road 10. So the purpose of this project is to enhance safety for vehicular traffic, as this tends to be a problematic intersection near Argus. So when this was originally programmed into our TIP, it had a letting of fiscal year 23. However, there have been some delays with funding, and then the planning and environmental linkage study began for US 30 and 31. So with all of that, it was kind of uncertain if this project was still happening, but with the new STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program, being passed, it is confirmed that this project is still happening, but there is a new letting date of fiscal year 2027, I believe around the September timeframe. So that's fiscal year 28. Currently, our TIP only covers fiscal years 22 through 26. So with this, we will be deleting this project from the 22 to 26 TIP for now, with the plans of including it in our new TIP that we develop next year. We do still have preliminary engineering in the TIP currently. It's in fiscal year 2023, so this project is really just getting started. So happy to take any questions, but again, we will be removing this from our current TIP with the plans of adding it to our new TIP once created.
So with this project specifically, first, yay, thank you. Next, I'm wondering, and this is just a very naive question, will the DES number follow, or do we look for new designations to make sure that we have comfort and tangibility?
That was my understanding as well, yeah.
Once the project was for lack of a better description.
Mhm.
you always fix it. But as project we also have some
Okay, great.
Yeah, and just a point of clarification around item A. It says delete project, and it probably should say delete phase, because the preliminary engineering is still happening. This project is still happening. It's largely just a clerical error that happened in the STIP, because this doesn't, if you think about a new interchange, the preliminary engineering was for fiscal 23. You're not going to see construction happen in fiscal 23 if you're just starting to engineer that interchange. So this is largely a clerical error that happened in the STIP and was then promulgated into our TIP. And so really this is a cleanup item. This project is still happening. The preliminary engineering is still programmed. Consultants will be able to bid on or submit letters of interest to that RFP in the November timeframe to really get this underway. So, really, this is just a cleanup item. It is not a question about whether this project is or isn't moving forward. All signs show that this project is going to move forward.
and the RFP act, but that was there.
So does this area get blocked out of the Pell study?
So it's up, the Pell study is still proceeding with this project.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion.
Second.
Both with smiles, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Great. Next, we have Transportation Resolution 25-22. So this resolution will mainly focus on adding in new projects to our TIP that we awarded through our call for projects. So you'll remember that we held a call for projects throughout the month of June, and then took the month of July to score those applications. And then throughout the month of August, kind of finalized our recommendations both for awarding new projects as well as awarding funding for additional funding for existing projects. So these recommendations were presented to our TTAC, our Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, in August. But since we did not have our policy board meeting in August, Carla has shared that presentation with all of you, outlining all of our recommendations. So that presentation outlines all of our funding recommendations through fiscal year 2029. But again, our current tip only covers fiscal years 22 through 26. So with this resolution, we'll just be adding in projects or phases that fall between that 22 and 26 time period. So any questions before running through these? Any questions regarding the presentation?
It's not a question, but could you also mention for the additional funds that probably a lot of those they'll find in the modifications?
Yeah, that's a good point. So most of the resolutions you'll see on your agenda and in the presentation are going to be for new projects, whereas most of the additional funding awards are going to be found on your modification sheet, simply because a definition of a modification is an increase in funding less than 31% of the total project. So for most of our additional funding awards, we're not awarding, funding that's more than 31% of the entire project. So those will be found on your modification sheet. Okay. With that, we can go ahead and move into the items within the resolution. So first we have item A. This is Bridge 385 carrying Hively Avenue over the Yellow River in Elkhart County. This is a bridge replacement project, and we are adding in preliminary engineering and right-of-way. Construction will fall in fiscal year 27, so it's not being included today. And the estimated total cost to complete for this project is $3.3 million.
Allison, just a clarification,
Yeah.
that is the Elkhart River, correct? Not the Yellow River?
No, it is the Yellow River.
Is it the Yellow? Okay,
Right where it's at, yes.
okay. All right, thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Next, we have item B. This is at East College Avenue, what we're calling Phase 3. We've funded phases 1 and 2 of this, and this is from Century Drive to what we're calling the entrance of a planned development. So to the north portion of East or College Ave, there is an industrial park planned for, I believe, slated for fiscal year 25. It will be developed. So it will be developed before this project is constructed. So the chairman and I will connect to the entrance of that. This is an auxiliary lane, two-way left turn lane project, and we are adding in preliminary engineering. Next, we have item C. This is EV charging infrastructure in downtown Goshen and downtown Napanee, noting that downtown Goshen will receive a level 3 charge station and downtown Napanee will be receiving 2 level 2 charge stations. So this is an exciting project for us. This is our first time funding any EV infrastructure type project, and we're able to utilize some of our new carbon reduction program funding that was allocated during the passing of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So again, this is an EV infrastructure charging project, and we're adding in preliminary engineering and construction. Okay, next we have item D. This is the Coal Line Trail Phase 3. So we've funded phases 1 and 2 of this. This will run from Lincoln Way West to Linden Avenue, down by the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center. This is a bike and pedestrian facility, and we are adding in preliminary engineering and construction with an estimated cost to complete of about $2.6 million. Next, we have item E, another City of South Bend project. This is a Safe Routes to School project near Kennedy Academy. So with the Safe Routes to School projects, the scope is not identified before funding is awarded, but once funding is awarded, they take that pot of money and then meet with the schools and kind of determine which sidewalks will be given priority for improvement. So that'll be around the Kennedy Academy school, and we are adding in preliminary engineering and construction for an estimated cost to complete of about $2.1 million. And then finally, we have item F. So this is an existing project that is already in our TIP, but we're doing a few different things to it. So first, we are increasing federal funding by about $2.2 million for the project. And to accommodate this, we are splitting right-of-way funding between fiscal years 23 and 24. And then we're also moving construction funding to fiscal year 25. So again, to better accommodate our budget and then also to better accommodate the city's timeline for this project. And then additionally, we are changing the work type for this project. So when this was originally programmed, it was a 2-lane to 5-lane project. It is now a 2-lane to 3-lane project. So with that, we are changing the work type to auxiliary lanes, 2-way left turn lane. Any questions on items A through F for Transportation Resolution 25-22?
Yes. Do you have approximate completion dates for the trail and then the other project around Kennedy Academy?
Yeah, so both of those are slated to go to letting in fiscal year 26.
Thank you.
So that would be any time between, they would go to bid letting anytime between July of 2025 to June of 2026. So completion would then be however long from there. So, you know, for example, if Coal Line went to bid letting in July, July of 25, it probably wouldn't be open to the public until 26. So just as an estimate,
Thank you.
still very early on those.
And I have a question, and I don't know if Dwight may be a better one to answer this, but the City of Elkhart project on Bristol Street, was the reason for the decrease from 5 to 3 lanes, was that right away, available right away?
No, it was really public input is what I would say. Initially, when the project was conceived, this was really back when it went into the Transportation Improvement Program. There was a question around whether it should be a 3 or a 5 lane. And the city had some public input sessions really early on in that project. And collectively, the public was supportive, it felt like, of a 3-lane section, but that the 5-lane section, there were challenges that, you know, with purchasing of homes or this, that, or the other thing. And so it really came down early on in the project to look at more intensely a 3-lane section. And so that's kind of where the city has proceeded since then. And nothing to this point has changed that path forward.
And then one more question, are they including pedestrian paths along this route? With,
Originally, we talked about that to the public. Good. There was a whole conflict because the section before that, up to Jeanwood,
yes,
up to Jeanwood doesn't have sidewalks.
I know.
And we've got some problems there, but they're trying to figure out a way to transition some sidewalk or maybe do some street, call it shrinkage, road diet. So I guess I could get you a picture of what we had planned and what the community had kind of agreed to.
So I'm just curious. I clearly live right there, as you well know, Dwight, but I see people all the time in the winter walking on Bristol, and it's you know, when they're avoiding snow piles and whatnot, it makes me concerned.
So this project, with where it's at in its phasing, it's just wrapping up the environmental document. I say that loosely because it's had a very lengthy environmental document review period and whatnot. So the next phase would really be moving towards right-of-way purchasing once that, so final design isn't finished, but I know the intent of the original project included pedestrian or trail amenities. So
Thank you.
we'll see what that final product ends up looking like in final design. But I know that that was the intention.
I will have Tori contact you or one of the engineers to tell you, to show you what we basically ended up with when we started this phase of it.
Mm.
I can't for the exact design, but I'll get information to you.
I appreciate
So
that.
you could see it, and it might not be the exact engineering plan that we're talking about here, but it'll be very close.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your explanation as well. So I think that concludes your new business resolutions. Is there a motion on items A through F?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Transit?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, today we have two resolutions and we can probably consider them both at the same time. Resolution 2622. This is both of these resolutions, subject matter wise, is related to section 5310. The 5310 program in Elkhart, Marshall, and St. Joseph, or Elkhart, Marshall, and Kosciuszko counties is handled and administered by the state. 5310 focuses on specialized transportation for individuals with disabilities as well as seniors. So both of these applicants provide specialized transport for either seniors or individuals with disabilities. So Resolution 2622 is the endorsement of the Council on Aging of Elkhart County. It is their Section 5310 grant application to the state of Indiana for the procurement of one low-floor minivan with a lift. And then FTA Section 5310, Resolution 2722 is the endorsement of the Marshall Stark Development Center, their 5310 grant application to the state of Indiana, and it is for the procurement of 4 low-floor minivans with a lift, as well as 2 12-passenger medium transit vehicles with a lift. Happy to try to answer any questions. Councilman?
Only about the Elkhart van. Is that going to be just a replacement, or does it add to their fleet and then anything taken away? Because I see that they've got several out.
Yeah, offhand, I don't have in front of me whether it's an expansion or a replacement vehicle. I know, though, that over the last, from MACOG's perspective, just to give you a little bit of a inside baseball here, we have not been able to purchase vehicles off of the state QPA up until recently, since pre-March 2020 is what I would say. Obviously, we all know what happened in March 2020 with COVID, and then that led to a series of issues with supply chain with the vehicles that were available for the state QPA. And part of it was, at the time, the major automotive manufacturers stopped supplying chassis to vehicle manufacturers like Braun, right? So, because those chassis were in high demand for their, GM and Chevy and all those folks, so they weren't selling additional chassis. So part of it was that the equipment manufacturer could not find Buy America steel compliant chassis. So that took a while. And then additionally, the price escalations since all of that happened, Midwest Transit, who's the equipment supplier to the state QPA, couldn't sell the vehicles at the price that was originally quoted in the QPA because the QPA is multiple years, right? So 2-3 years ago, they submitted bids. No one would have had the foresight to know that vehicles that used to cost $40,000 now cost $75,000, right? For many of us, now all of those kind of issues have finally been hammered out. The state did some modifications, et cetera. Now you can buy off the state QPA. There are vehicles. They do have a long lead time. So for MACOG, we bought 6 vehicles when we had the opportunity to buy off the QPA, because we were basically buying the vehicles that we should have bought in 20, the vehicles we should have bought in 21, and then the vehicles that we needed to buy in 22. So we bought pretty much 3 years worth. So I can't speak offhand for these entities, but when I see the amount of vehicles Marshall Stark is purchasing, I would tend to lean towards the fact that because vehicles have been so hard to get a hold of recently, that probably these are replacements. That's my gut, but
Talk to David.
I'm sure Mr. Tony could answer that for you.
Thank you.
If there are any other questions, happy to answer those. And if not, then it's up to your all's prerogative, but you could probably do a vote for 26 and 27 together.
I would entertain a motion for items 26 and 27.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of passing the resolutions? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Hello, Caitlin.
Hello, good morning. So I have two resolutions that I'm going to be presenting, and they're related to some of the discretionary grants that MACOG is planning to apply for in the coming day and month. Resolution 28-22 is a resolution endorsing a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant application. MACOG is planning to submit and request funding, $500,000 in funding to support development of a regional safety action plan, which will cover all 4 counties and the communities therein. Where, as part of this planning process, we would be looking to establish a task force or committee, doing some further safety analysis, as well as collecting public engagement and collaboration, as well as identifying particular projects, as well as strategies that we would put forth in order to address safety and reduce roadway fatalities and serious injuries in our region as a whole. And in order to kind of collect full regional buy-in and show the region's support, we do have a resolution today that includes all of your names. So I think James has that form, and I would ask after the resolution is presented that you all would be willing to sign. Do you have? Okay. Yeah.
So the reason we've done that is this is a little bit of a different format of a resolution than what we would normally have. In the application that we're applying for, we're doing a regional application, and they want to see regional support, and we're not really able to provide individualized letters of support. They didn't want to see a laundry list of letters. So we felt like the most impactful way to show the grant reviewer that there is regional support is a resolution from our board. But also, since they don't necessarily have the most familiarity with our board, to be able to then see the signatures and who those signatures are from: 4 county commissioners, 7 mayors, 4 county council members, 3 city council members, and 2 representatives of NDOT, we felt like was a way to drive home. And so that's why we've done this resolution as individual sign-ons, if you will. So that is why there is the different format for this resolution.
Yeah, and we're excited about the opportunity to utilize this funding if awarded. So I'd be happy to ask or entertain any questions. But if not, I would ask for your endorsement of Resolution 28-22.
Are these to discuss such things as traffic calming measures?
Yeah. So as part of this, and I think we'll be looking to kind of how we tie some recommendations into the plan to actually implementation. So one of those items is kind of building on our tactical urbanism toolkit that we're utilizing. So we can utilize those items to test out projects and such as traffic calming in our communities.
Yeah, so just to touch and expand on that a little bit more. Over the last few years, MACOG has made very intentional efforts and investments around safety and around vulnerable users, our bike and pedestrians and those kind of folks. And you can think about that stemming back to 2016 when we did the active transportation plan, the recommendations that came out of that, and then where we've gone since, all the way up till the few $1,000s worth of purchases of our lending library for what we call tactical urbanism. Those that aren't familiar, when you walked in, the intersection right by where you walked in, there's red paint on the ground to delineate what a bump out would look like. There's also delineators so that the public can feel what it would feel like if there was curb there. It's a visual barrier, as well as then those plants and, all of those things, those supplies were lent to South Bend to use to test out this idea. And we're doing this in other areas, whether it's trying to figure out in Warsaw what a bike lane would look like, or in all sorts of other communities, to experiment with these ideas that we've had on ways to improve the pedestrian experience or safety overall. But maybe we're unsure, and before we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to move curb line, we want to make sure that it gets us that intended benefit. And so our approach for this regional Safe Streets for All is to then basically ask for money from USDOT to accelerate what we would have done in the next 6 years with our own money, but to do it all in 1 year. So to get us as an organization where we would have been in 2028 with our own money to get us there in 2023. And so that will look at doing a regional safety plan where we can figure out systemic and systematic ways to improve safety. And we believe that part of that solution is then the experimentation, the sandbox, where we are able to use our lending library so that local governments can experiment and let the public interact with these new ideas. And so we do see traffic calming as an integral part of safety. And so hopefully that answers the question of really where we want to go with that. But happy to clarify.
And the city or the entities can determine whether that needs to be in a downtown versus a neighborhood area.
Yeah. I think Dustin later will talk about the tactical urbanism kind of update. I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but basically, if local governments have projects, whether it's neighborhood based, I mean, a lot of this stemmed from the idea started with neighborhood over off Riverside in South Bend, where we were working with South Bend on an intersection that has a very odd angle and has a speeding challenge or a perceived speeding challenge. I don't live there personally, so I don't know offhand, but we worked in that, NNN area to talk about what it would look like if these different traffic calming measures were implemented. And we liked that concept of being able to experiment and low cost show the public and decision makers and gain buy-in around kind of unique ideas, that we then created an entire lending library where we have thousands of dollars worth of materials that local governments can basically borrow from us. We don't expect the paint back that you painted on the ground, but you get the idea, so that you can test those ideas out. But I know, like I said, I didn't want to steal his thunder, but Dustin will give us more of an update later. But yeah, that'll be a component of this as well.
Any other questions on the resolution? Any
Make a
thought?
motion to approve.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Caitlin. Next on your list?
All right, the next item we have is Resolution 29-22, and this is a resolution endorsing a railroad crossing elimination grant application on behalf of the city of Elkhart and Elkhart County. MACOG's planning to be the lead applicant, kind of jointly with the city of Elkhart and Elkhart County. And this application will be to cover the significant shortfall that two projects that they currently have at Hively Avenue and Sunnyside Avenue. These projects were funded in the local tracks program in 2018, and just because of cost inflation, there's
had a shortfall of about $19 million for construction. And so MACOG is working with these two communities to put it together an application to apply for this shortfall. I'd be happy to answer any questions about this. Otherwise, I'd ask for your approval of Resolution 29-22.
Motion to approve. Oh, Dwight.
I do have a question because this is my district and I get a lot of offhanded comments about it, good and bad. What's the likelihood of us being able to fund this completely? We're talking about such a shortfall and some of the citizens are saying, oh, we're going to increase our taxes because of it, whatever remark they make. And I don't have a good response. So are we going to be able to get it funded and not have county and city taking a huge hit?
We believe that this grant program comes at a very opportune time, and that we will have an extremely competitive application. And what I mean by that is this is the first year that this grant program has ever happened. The rail crossing elimination program did not exist before. This is coming out of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So this is a whole brand new grant application process, new program. We would think that reviewers from the USDOT and FRA will see the benefit of these two projects being presented together as a bundle, that with a very low investment from the federal government's perspective, they would create, is it 5 miles? 5 miles of uninterrupted siding, basically, on an extremely busy triple-tracked railway. And that they aren't even being asked to fund 100% of that or even 80% of it. They're really just coming in and filling in the final gap and relieving the local government of that gap burden. And then that these projects are already so far along that they will be in construction within months of award, right? Like, if I was a federal reviewer, it is a low investment in terms of the scale of what you could see, right? It's a low investment with a major impact and it's quick. I think it's a no-brainer and is very competitive. Now, we have no way of knowing how many other folks will apply or those kind of things. But we think that this is one of the best routes to go with applying for this grant application because of how competitive this application will be. And we think it's great that these two projects are bundled and MACOG is going to be that kind of independent third party handling it because it shows that impact even more. So
just as a follow-up dovetail question, you mentioned the 5 mile corridor.
Yeah.
Can that be part of it? Because when we lose the two intersections, that's a no-brainer to make it a no-blow zone all the way through except for the downtown crossing. And my constituency and the majority of people who are interacting with the railroad would love to have that a no-blow zone. So from Dunlap all the way through the city, and then it picks up in Osceola and Mishawaka.
that'll be a conversation that we'll need to have with Norfolk Southern.
Well,
But-
the
but I-
city's not having a whole lot of luck communicating with them, and
I'd be happy to reach out to Derek Sublett with Norfolk Southern and to enter into a conversation about that. I don't know necessarily that that's going to be a part of the application. But yeah, when you look at then, basically from Main Street southeast, you have a series of improvements that have been done at, Indiana, at Prairie, you go all the way down. And there would not be at-grade, or there would not be at-grade crossings anymore in that section. So I think there's the potential, but that's obviously a question that we'd have to talk to
Well,
Norfolk Southern about.
I appreciate your remarks, and if there's anything I could do to have that conversation with him or the mayor, I know that we would be happy to do that. Because I think it dovetails with this project, with this resolution. Thank you.
And with this resolution request, I'm assuming that you're looking for the same support from the region as well, like you did with the last resolution, and that's why the benefit of this versus individual letters and.
Yeah, also, the unique aspect is these two local governments aren't applying separately. Instead, they are asking MACOG, because MACOG's an eligible applicant. So instead, they are asking MACOG to be the applicant, to join these two projects kind of together. They'll be individually managed by their localities, but we will act as that kind of house for these funds, right? And so, because they are asking MACOG to be the applicant, we felt it was necessary for the board to sign off on that. Also, the regional support helps in the application.
James, what's the total cost of the project?
The total cost or the total ask?
Well, I know 19 is what you're asking for here, but
Yeah.
what's the total?
For both projects, I think it's close to
60 or 70?
yeah, 60 or 70 million.
I
I have the estimates. I can
Yeah, I
So-
think the Elkhart, the Sunnyside one is around 30
yeah. And these projects
for less than a
um,
mile. I just want to point that out.
Yeah. They were both awarded about 26 million originally from the local tracks project.
So that's the projects that same local tracks when we.
Yeah, same as 1300 North. So these both were selected in local tracks. The state decided with the increase of federal funds to not have bond for all the local tracks projects that they were going to bond for. That was part of the original kind of Indiana funding bill many years ago. And so they converted them all to federal funds, as you're aware, but they were not able to provide additional funds. And since that time, costs have escalated significantly. So
we may be faced with the same thing, Tony.
yeah, it's a different cost item, right? And so
Maybe less zeros. But
Yeah.
still lots of money.
similar impact, yeah. Yep.
So I think I heard the start of a motion, maybe?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Resolution 30-22.
All right. So this is actually, it's a resolution, but before we get to the resolution, we do have a short presentation. We did send you a presentation in advance of this meeting so that you could watch that at your leisure. But MACOG has been working on the Connect Transit Plan. We are now finishing the second phase of that plan, and we are now getting to trying to think through in specifics of where we want to have future transit investments. And so we have Scudder Wegg with us here today, who will introduce the folks on the team and conduct that presentation for us, just to give you additional context before we really discuss the resolution. So I'll turn it over to Scudder. Scudder is also with Jarrett Walker and Associates, who's been our lead firm. Jarrett Walker and Associates is a nationally renowned firm for transit planning. So Scudder.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great, good to be with you again. I know you have already had a long meeting, so I will try to keep my presentation pretty short. We sent you a video summary of the responses to the conceptual alternatives that we presented to the public over the summer. And those were part of this second phase where we were asking people to tell us what they preferred in terms of two big questions: ridership versus coverage, and how much more to potentially invest. So we showed them Elkhart and Goshen coverage service-oriented network on the left here, and ridership-oriented network. Ridership meaning more frequency in places where more people and more activity are. Coverage meaning less frequency spread further across the cities, but covering more people, but not necessarily being more useful. And in that summary we provided last time, that was the interim update of where the responses stood as of mid-August. The survey was closed at the end of August. We got a few more responses, or almost 80 more responses, I think, actually, to the end of the month. They did not change the direction of the response relative to these concepts significantly. We did get a bit more diversity of response, though, in terms of race and income in the last couple of responses. Big picture, among stakeholders and among the public responses to the Elkhart and Goshen, the preference was definitely in the direction of the coverage concept. More than a third strongly preferred the coverage concept. Over half either strongly or generally preferred the coverage concept. Preference for the ridership concept was definitely in the minority, and the strong preference there you could see in dark red was not very high on the ridership concept side. We also showed people the two vision and growth concepts to imagine what does it look like if you expand service. And I'll just remind you, we've talked about peer comparisons. What is your service level in Elkhart and Goshen in terms of service per person? It's very low compared to almost all the other peers we've shown. And that has an impact on your relevance, how many people can ride, because you can't ride a bus that's not there. And so the trips per capita is quite low compared to all of your reasonably comparable peers. So we had a growth concept and a vision concept to imagine what does a significant expansion of service look like. The growth concept had 115% more service, and I will just make one quick note here that that is an update and a clarification from what we had been saying previously, and that we had previously been saying was only a 15% increase. That was a calculation error on my end, and my apologies for that. But the growth concept actually represented for Elkhart and Goshen 115% increase. Stakeholders and the public very much wanted and asked for and responded to, saying they preferred something significant between the growth and vision concept or the vision concept or more in terms of additional investment in service. The public, 77% preferred some kind of increase in investment. A third asked for the vision level investment in additional service. And the vast majority of respondents to the survey said they would definitely support a local additional investment to make these happen, because that's the only way that you could achieve those increases is by increased local investment. Federal and state and other resources are not likely to increase dramatically to achieve those increases in service. Since I gave you the in video form the kind of overall review of demographics, I won't go into that in detail right now, but I'm happy to answer questions, and I have slides that can speak to that if we want to. So I just want to close with a couple of slides about the policy question before you, now that we've heard from the public on this, is in the short term, we are going to sit down in a week and a half and design 2 recommended networks for Elkhart and Goshen. One is a short-term network. What do you want to do in the next couple of years within the funding constraints you have now? And so the question for that policy direction is, where should we land? Should we land closer to the coverage concept, which is more like your existing network, and what most people said they preferred among stakeholders in the public? Should we land somewhere between the coverage and ridership concept, or should we land at the ridership concept level? And the numbers to think about in that respect are the coverage concept was 70% ridership, 30% coverage. In between level would be 80-20, and the ridership concept level would be 90-10. The other big question is the second network we're going to draw is the 10-year recommended network of where transit should be in Elkhart and Goshen over the 10-year horizon of this plan. And that basic question to you then is, how much more should we imagine that you all can invest in the next 10 years to expand service? Should we aim for the growth concept? Should we aim somewhere less than the growth concept or somewhere more than that over the next 10 years? What percentage increase in service should we aim for? And to give you some sense of what that would take, I've sketched out just at a high level, what would it take to achieve the growth concept, which is 98,000 revenue hours, about 115% more service than today. If you would stick to the basic standard dollars that you can use from FTA, Federal Transit Administration, state, and others, you'd be looking at about a $4.3 million investment from local funding, which is a substantial increase of from the current levels of 190,000 a year that you get from the cities and the county. And you could use federal CMAQ funding and some of the Transit Trust Fund funding that you have built up over trades with Lafayette over the years to phase in that increase over time. But to sustainably fund that growth network over time would require about $4.3 million a year. And for context, your Elkhart County at least has about 1.1 million a year in federal CMAQ funding that you can use on an 80-20 basis to help support transit. Another scenario, which is, could you get halfway to the growth concept? Using a range of resources like those CMAQ funds, assuming you continue to use some of the Transit Trust Fund dollars that you've traded with Lafayette to help kind of phase in your growth, and use some tools that the FTA allows you to use to count things like capital cost of contracting with your contractor, which allows you to use 80-20 split of federal funding towards about 40% of your contracted costs. You could construct a scenario where over a couple of year period, if you use that full 1.1 million of CMAQ funding and these other resources, you could get to about a 60% increase in service for an additional $389,000 a year in local funding, which is obviously significantly less than 4.3. Some of these resources, like the use of Transit Trust Fund dollars from your trades Lafayette, would eventually run out, and that would therefore require you to start pitching in that $600,000 a year, for example. But that would be enough to get you to about a 60% increase in service. And so you think about that in terms of what you do today. Today, you run about 9 buses a day in full service. Goshen has already committed to helping fund an additional 2 buses in service, and that 60% growth means about another 5 buses in service all the time. So you can imagine that as 5 additional hourly routes, similar in length to your blue route or your orange route, for example, in Elkhart, would be the kind of thing you could afford with that kind of an increase. Lastly, I want to note that another piece that was highlighted in the concepts report and that we are working with MACOG staff to help put into the recommendations, and MACOG staff are actually already working to make happen very soon, is van pools. Van pools are a very useful tool for specific workplaces and industrial and office parks, particularly those on the fringe that are very hard to reach with fixed route transit, or that are very highly oriented towards one type of use, like major industrial parks. And van pools can be relatively cost effective because you're not funding the operating costs. Transit can be very expensive because you're paying drivers, maintenance staff, et cetera, to operate service all the time. And in van pools, you're mostly just funding the capital expenses where you can use a lot of federal dollars to support that. And so van pool programs, the big investment is the time and the effort of staff to help coordinate with employers, to find groups of employees with reasonably closely located homes that you can build, a van pool set of 5 to 8 people who would share that van pool to a single employer or to a single industrial park at roughly the same time of day, and work with employers to help subsidize some of that operating cost, like the fuel cost. But you don't have to pay the drivers because one of the employees offers to drive. And so that these van pool programs can be a really useful tool for improving job access to some of your more peripheral industrial sites. And it's a program that we've been helping MACOG staff think through how to get off the ground in the near future. So that's the summary of where we are, really quick, and happy to answer questions as you think about where to land on these policy questions.
So essentially the policy question that we're asking you today, so that we can move forward with kind of finishing the plan and what that next phase, that phase 3 looks at is really taking a deep dive into what direction we want to go in and what that would actually look like on the map, so that we can then create, as I said during phase 2, these aren't proposals, right? We're not proposing something. We're trying to start a conversation around what transit could be. Well, in phase 3, we actually want to create a transit proposal where we're showing how we would invest in transit and what that would look like over the next 10 years. So the policy question really that we're asking you today is, how would the board like to proceed with future transit investments? Is that something where we do want to do carpool, or we don't want to, or van pool, I should say, that we want to move forward with van pool as one of those additional investments throughout the region outside of fixed route transit, that we want to do the step towards growth, or we don't want to do the step towards growth, or and so really that's the policy question that we're asking you today. We're happy to answer any questions related to that. So I don't know if there are questions that could help stimulate the conversation.
Is that van pool idea being used other places? I'm assuming that's the first I've kind of heard of that.
Yeah, so our region historically hasn't done van pool, but it's not an innovative idea. I mean, it might be for our area, but van pool is already something that happens. There are 12 vans that already exist today that are funded by the private sector that I think Enterprises uses, and I think 9 of them are in Kosciuszko County that go to either Fort Wayne to Kosciuszko County or the reverse.
I didn't know who this was paying. I think Maple Leaf has that.
Yeah, so those already exist in our region. It's not big because they're left up to every employer to figure out and navigate on their own, as well as they're not subsidized. But no, across the country, you look at there are major van pool programs in Louisville, Grand Rapids, Columbus, Ohio. Actually, the entire state of Ohio, because of how well it went in Columbus, they expanded through the state a program called GoHio, where now every region throughout the state has basically a van pool program. They all scale and they're different sizes. The market potential for our area is about probably 30 to 60 vans. But that's over maybe a 3-year period. You build up to that. Probably that first year you're only in the tens and teens. But with new market forces, like if the electric vehicle battery plant happens in kind of the Northwest St. Joe County, I know that they have a strong interest in a van pool program. So that market potential could be different. So.
Well, it's getting complicated over in Elkhart, and these are the things that we're trying to address locally within the city, but we have such a growth, and this is going to be a long-winded kind of concern. I like everything that's presented. Number one is, if we go to the next phase, when would we implement some of the changes that we're really leaning toward. But the big question is this County Road 17 corridor at County Road 120, six-span bridge, is getting to be a real congestion point. And with all of our construction going on, roads are always the secondary decision to be made, or the third or the fourth. We're really growing like crazy over there. And van pooling is a perfect situation, but we also need a transit hub that we've talked about for years downtown, the transfer point. And I've fallen off of that conversation. I don't know where that would be. So we got a lot of these things that are just on the whiteboard, if you will. And we need to make them all come together, because in my district, we have got so many people who have limited transportation options. And we really need to build that up with the downtown and the Tolson Center area. And that includes the mall area to the south. Woodland Crossing, I'm talking about specifically because of investments there. I want to get those people better access so they can get out to that new job at Amazon and Champion and all those other places that are growing. I know that's long-winded, but we really need to take this transit plan and see how we can specifically address those concerns.
Yeah, and I think that is what we are doing with the plan. Part of it, though, is that the van pool program, for an example, would be a good addition to fixed route transit in the sense that it is customizable to be to everyone's origin and their destination, right? Like, so it's very, especially when you're talking about trying to get out to, say, an Amazon facility that is further out. And whereas if we're running fixed route to, say, Amazon, not to say that we couldn't, not to say that we wouldn't, but that originates out of downtown. And so people have to get downtown first, and then from downtown, then has to get up kind of the north side. Whereas running a van pool program in addition to fixed route does allow for some better flexibility, especially then when you factor in shift times, right? The cost of running fixed route service system-wide for third shift. Well, that's something we would, of course, desire. That is a costly venture. And so, you know, being able to have something for everyone, I think van pool does fit into that option. That's not to say that it competes with or takes away from fixed route, but it accentuates it.
Well, the options in our particular situation, van pooling is a much better option because of flexibility and that mobility, that quick. It's not a quick fix. It's just a quicker way to get them there. And the flexibility is really appealing. So that's all I really want to say.
I might, as far as a discussion point goes, I think this is a shift in approach, and I'm not opposed to it by any stretch of the imagination. I want to be clear first on that. I'm concerned about the ability to convey the availability to the public. I think that's going to be the harder piece with this project. Everybody is always thinking about conventional transportation, public transportation. You go to a stop, you get on the bus, you get off the stop, but you don't have to call ahead. You don't do anything up. You rely on the service. And as we engage in these discussions, which may or may not make the best sense, I think we have to be very cognizant of the need to communicate the shift in approach to the transportation if we continue to follow the path. And I'm okay with it. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and you know, we're not going to shift away from fixed route transit. That is going to be something that is provided. It is a base level of transportation. You know, we would see it as a potentially an and, not an or, right? So you're going to provide fixed route transit, and I know Scudder walked through kind of a process of how we might be able to grow fixed route transit by, say, 60%, through a number of different kind of levers that we could pull. That is separate and distinct from also doing van pool. Those would be two separate things, but both would kind of be in that kind of overall spirit of transit investments that we would be considering.
And I would just add to that in addition to be separate, it is sort of a complement. Van pools are a complementary set of investments that help you reach and connect to places that are just going to be extremely hard to reach at a level of investment we're talking about of between 60% and 100% increase. In the growth concept, which is 115% increase, we didn't have a fixed route service to Amazon because it's not affordable really in that level of investment. And a van pool program, though, is something that you could help fund to Amazon, and is obviously much cheaper to support because it's really oriented towards the workforce demands that you're trying to meet for that facility in that area. And that's one of the reasons we talk a lot about this tool for these peripheral job workforce needs at industrial parks, because industrial parks are really hard to serve with fixed route transit in a cost-effective way, because their demand is so centered around shift times and it is really just about workers. Whereas most of the rest of your transit demand across the region is about people going to all sorts of places for all sorts of things, for shopping trips, for medical appointments, for work, for everything. But when you're going to far-flung industrial parks on the edge, you're really just doing workers. And so your demand is very limited to certain times of day. And therefore, it's just not nearly as cost effective for fixed route service to be the primary solution.
I just want to reiterate again, I'm not opposed to the van option. I actually think it also offers us an opportunity to manage our costs as needs change, companies shift requirements, shift schedules, all of those things. I think it's a great option. I just think that the general public is not going to think of that as the first option and won't understand it unless we educate them. That said, I'm curious how quickly these programs can be adjusted, brought up to date, or brought to execution, or any of those things. When can we go live, I guess?
Yeah. So this would be something that we would procure out, because there are a number of different national partners that provide this service across the country. That would also limit our, say, capital expenditures, as we wouldn't be purchasing vans, or we wouldn't be doing a number of those kind of items. So, it is something that we have eligibility for as a use with our federal funds. So it is something that we could, if we had approval to move forward with, I think we could start putting the steps together to put that funding in place, and then put together an RFP, and we would probably be able to have that van pool system launching in 2023. I don't have an exact time frame. I would probably, just from a safety perspective, venture to guess Q2 of 2023, just to give us time. But that's, I think if we had kind of that direction today, we could start to make those steps, as well as then one of those other questions that we're wanting to try and get direction on is, Scudder walk through what it might look like to increase over the next 10 years the fixed route system by 60%. And then if we had that direction on whether it's 60% or a different number of 0, 50, really wherever the board would like to go, that would help guide us in that next phase of understanding what we would design and what that kind of 60% increase would purchase us in terms of new transit.
Could I ask a question also?
Yeah.
Scudder, is that 60% going to address the weekend gap times?
It could, if you all want us to emphasize that. In what we drew in the growth concept, we focused the increase in investment on expanding the coverage of service, and we did not add hours of service or Sunday service in the way we drew that growth concept. If you all, however, want to emphasize the investment into weekends or evenings, that's something we could do in the draft plan. And I should emphasize as well that something I did not say is that this policy direction gives us guidance about what to put into the draft plan. And then there is a third phase of engagement and discussion with the community at the draft plan phase, where we get their response to the actual proposal, and then refine and finalize after that third phase. So this is not the final say in what happens with the draft plan and the final plan. It is giving us your high-level policy direction for what we ought to do in crafting the draft plan.
Thank you.
So is there something you need from the board specifically?
Yeah, so the specific things that we'd be asking for this item is we felt like the question best asked was the percent of additional investment we would like to see in the fixed route transit, and then whether or not to move forward with fan pool. We felt like those were the two questions that we were asking guidance for today.
And again, this is on a policy decision, not actual.
This is a policy decision so that we, as staff, can work with the consultant to then design what those investments would look like. Those go to the public. The public still provides us with feedback. We're not approving a final plan or proposal today, as well as we're not implementing this today in the sense of, those implementation steps are still always going to come to you even after that plan is approved. So there will be plenty of checks and balances, but this will give us a direction from the board on really what type of level of investment we're looking at to move forward with, so that we're not just pie skying here on those next phases.
Move for approval. Resolution.
We would need a percentage.
So can you suggest a percentage?
Scudder, can you bring up that slide again that has
There you
the
go.
percentages?
Okay.
Or the options you guys were kind of looking at?
There were three, I think, right? If I'm thinking of the right slide. Thank you, Caitlin.
Let me share. If I may. Here we go. So I'll back up just a moment to the two concepts that showed additional investment in the second phase.
Yeah,
One
I
of
think,
them had,
Scudder, if you could jump to the stepping towards growth is
Yeah.
what the board was talking about.
gotcha. So this stepping toward the growth concept gets you about halfway to that growth concept level of investment. So this is about a 60% increase in service. And this is a rough financial scenario that gets you to a 60% growth in service. And with a local funding commitment of $580,000 in the initial phases, growing over time as you use up transit trust fund resources and other resources. So that's the how you could get to 60% growth.
Townsman.
So I like this presentation. The numbers are good on the step. This one, yes.
Yep.
But I don't want to run out of the option with West Lafayette. Was that eventually going to run out no matter what?
Any day they could tell us when we trade money that they don't want to trade. So in theory, that could end with the change of a director or the change of their investment priorities. But, over time, as we increase our level of investment, we will need to access more of the federal funds that we're not currently accessing because, we'll have more local funds. So at a certain point in time, we could phase out that transfer because we would have the local resources needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
We're not going to get away from it tomorrow.
oh, yeah, but I think the trend right now is to increase transportation funding across the country because of just the change into electric automobiles and more high-speed rail. And that'll translate down the line to maybe electric buses and so on and so forth, even electric van pool. So,
The other question would be, can this be amended? If the 60% is selected today, can that be increased?
Yes, I think this is a goal, and it provides us with direction on how we would shape this next phase of the plan, right? So this provides us with that direction that moves us towards then phase 3 of this plan. I don't believe it would be binding in a way that if there were additional funds available that we couldn't go to 75 or 80 or 100% additional. This would just be the 10-year goal would be a 60% increase in investment.
So again, we're asking for a motion to approve a 60%. I'm going to help everybody along here. 60% goal in growth on our transit funding. And as well as van pool.
I would move for approval of that as stated.
So you're making a motion for,
Motion for 60% increase and van pool.
great. I would
Second.
entertain a second.
Yes, second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion
Is
carries.
that leading the witness?
I don't
Thank you
have
all
any
very much.
witnesses.
So, thank you, Scudder. We'll try and get through these staff updates quickly. I know the meeting has been pretty long. If you do need to step out at this point, there are no other actions that are needed. So we understand if you do need to go, but the staff update will be informational. So we'll go from there.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to give a quick update about Okra's CDBG construction program. So round 2 has been delayed for applications as the final grant agreement between HUD and Okra has not been finalized just yet. We don't have a date on when those applications will open, but the planning Q4 applications will go on as planned as those are still drawing down 2021 funds. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us or your community liaisons, and we'd be more than happy to help along with any questions. Thank you very much.
This is just an informational slide, kind of keeping you abreast of all the grant opportunities, discretionary grant opportunities that are coming out. So we discussed the rail crossing elimination, which is due in October, and then the Reconnecting Communities program is due shortly thereafter.
And quick update on PASER ratings and asset management plans. So now that NDOT's Community Crossings Matching Grant has closed, it's time to start thinking about eligibility for next calendar year. So if your community needs help putting together your asset management plan or needs help updating your road inventory for that plan, please reach out to us.
And the tactical urbanism update, we've pretty much covered. So I'm just going to be very brief on that. The only 2 things that I wanted to add with Warsaw, we actually helped them also develop and implement a survey, public survey. We've actually had over 250 responses to that. So that will be very beneficial in helping kind of manage or refine what we do in the future on that. The second update is that Plymouth actually just updated or approved that they will be doing a tactical urbanism project here in the month of October. So still moving ahead. The only other thing to add is that this is kind of the coming months are a great time to start planning for next year's projects. If there's something that people are concerned about or interested in seeing if this would be the right approach, we would be glad to talk with you and help you work through that.
What would be the process of getting a public survey, say in South Bend, South St. Joe area?
So for the actual projects, in fact, the one on the right and the pictures up there is the South Bend survey that James referenced earlier. They are developing their own survey. We will probably be actually hosting it electronically, but they're developing the questions for it, and we'll work with them to kind of refine that. Does that answer your question?
It sure did. Thanks.
So a couple weeks ago, we did a stakeholder kickoff for the Michigan on the Move 2050 transportation plan, which is kind of setting forth the long-term investments that we plan to make in transportation over the next 20 to 30 years. These are a few snapshots from the input. We really appreciate you and your staff's input into this process. This kickoff meeting was really focused on establishing different growth scenarios. And over the coming year, we'll be going through a variety of phases. So this first phase is focusing on growth and goals. Our next phase will be focused on needs and priorities, so identifying where deficiencies might exist, further data analysis. And then in the beginning of next year, we'll be kind of focusing on projects and policies with the overall end goal of having a final approved Michigan on the Move 2050 transportation plan by September timeframe. So in this coming fall, we'll be focusing on stakeholder outreach, public outreach, and if you all have any events or meetings or just in general places where we can go to talk about the plan and collect input from a variety of groups, we'd very much appreciate that.
In the fall, we focus on cleaner and electric vehicle education. That's when National Drive Electric Week falls. We've held a couple lectures in partnership with the Studebaker Museum and Goshen Library. We also held an EV display as part of First Fridays in Goshen. We had over 20 vehicles, hundreds of people, and the city of Goshen's first F-150 Lightning pickup truck was delivered just the week before. So that was really exciting to have that as part of the display. The next opportunity to experience something similar will be South Bend First Fridays. That's October 7th. It'll be downtown here near the Gridiron. So we hope that'll be a good event. And that's the last staff update.
Yep. I was going to say, the Connect Transit Plan, we already talked about. And the next step there is that Transpo will be having a board meeting to have a very similar discussion about investments and where they want to go with South Bend, Mishawaka area. And then that would conclude all of our staff updates. I don't know if any other board members had any privilege of the floor items, and I'm not aware of any public comments. And we no longer have a quorum, so we do stand adjourned from my knowledge. So I appreciate, we couldn't have an August meeting. So I appreciate everybody sticking out the longer meeting today. So we stand adjourned.